So I finished it over a month ago, obviously now. A lot of time has passed. But I've been sitting on this, really trying to cook up a way to make Suzanne Collins answer for the crimes that she committed in this book. After a long while of brainstorming, I am unfortunately here to announce that I have come up with absolutely nothing. In fact, I pray that she continues to rip my heart out for the rest of my days. I think this is what Stockholm Syndrome feels like. I'm really okay with it, kind of. I'm not gonna lie to you. I do have a ridiculous amount of thoughts about this book, and I did think that taking the time between reading it and filming this video would give me some time to be slightly less emotional. But every time I think about this book, it's waterworks, okay? Tears on tears on tears. So contrary to what Hamish says in this book, you are allowed to use my tears for entertainment. Now here's some of my lore. When I was a fresh, funky 11 years of age, I decided to take myself and my mother to the movie theaters to see a new hot movie that was coming out titled The Hunger Games. At the time, I knew nothing about this series. I didn't have any clue what it would end up meaning to me later on in my life. But what I do vividly remember is my mom coming up to me after the movie and just asking me a very simple question. Why did they kill that little girl? But what really makes me sick to my stomach is to this day, I still cannot give her an answer. I can't. It was so traumatic for both of us. And I had absolutely nothing to say to my mother. I had no explanation for her. But what I did know I had to do, yes, was go to the nearest Borders and pick up the entire trilogy. Little did little Eden know that this series would take over her life for the next decade and some change. I have consumed such an unhealthy amount of Hunger Games related media since 2012 that if you carved out a piece of my brain, you would probably find the Mockingjay epilogue tattooed in between the folds. Let's be serious. And since then, I have been a part of a fandom that talks themselves in circles so much that we cannot even remember what is and isn't canon anymore. At this point, Suzanne needs to make us co-authors. Like, we are making up another world in her world. Mockingjay came out in 2010, and at that point, we did not think that we were going to get another Hunger Games book. Then came the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, this was a shock to many. I think Ballad coming 10 years after the final installment of the original trilogy made some people a little weary because they were like, is Suzanne? Is this a cash grab? But I think what also confused a lot of people is that she decided that this book was going to be from President Snow's point of view. Like, we were getting his background, his history. And out of all the damn people, we were looking around like, wait, why him though? Like, why him though? Like, Finnick is right there. Hamish is right there. Why on God's green earth would I ever want to be in President Snow's mind? That's what I was thinking before. But this book ended up being a true gift. And not because it led to the film that then led to the onslaught of Tom Blythe as young Snow thirst trap edits on TikTok. I am literally looking at you guys. And listen, I too had a difficult time separating that beautiful man from the character that he was playing. I have eyes, Tom Blythe is attractive, I get it. But the way that those comment sections exposed me to an entire different category of people, President Snow sympathizers, I had to log off. I think we lost the plot a little bit. I had to take a step back. Anyways, it was a gift because it gave us Lucy Gray Baird, our little songbird, the victor of the 10th Hunger Games, and some phenomenal insight into a very important group of people in District 12, the Covey. Coriolanus Snow was down bad for our girl. Like, we truly got to see how much Lucy Gray drove our little dictator insane, how she mixed with his traumatic childhood and a lack of guidance was just all a recipe for disaster. He said, my trauma? No, it's gonna be our trauma. I'm making my problems everybody's problem. In 2020, when Collins was interviewed about why she decided to come to the front and give us Snow's story to begin with, she told David Leviathan, publisher and editorial director at Scholastic, I want to make history.
I went into the Disney Channel building and I sat down with the president of Disney Channel and I said, I want to make history. And that's what this is.
What she actually said was, Snow's authoritarian convictions grew out of the experiences of his childhood, as did his complicated relationships with Mockingjays, food, the Hunger Games, District 12, District 13, and women. So you rewind and plant the seeds. She gave us more of Panem's and the game's history through Snow and his relationship with Lucy Gray. I mean, in this book, Snow gets close to rebellion, gets bitten by the very systems that he yearns to uphold, and then slithers back to the Capitol to function as a certified menace until his final breath. But we learn one huge thing from this book. It really took one man One damaged, sick, and twisted man to change the trajectory of Panem forever. So if it takes one man to build it all up, why can't it take one girl to bring it all down? And was it Katniss herself? Was Katniss just a very special case? Or just where she was, who she encountered, and the whole big mess of it all that finally led to the downfall of the Capitol? Throughout the trilogy, we're fed little tiny microscopic hints about failed rebel plots of the past. Revolutions that never came into fruition, sparks that never turned into fires. So it leaves the reader really wondering, how many of these did we not hear about? Like, how many of these went under the radar? How many Katnisses could there have been and never were? I'm being annoying and asking a lot of questions and low-key sound like a National Geographic narrator, but I digress. When Sunrise on the Reaping was announced in 2024, Collins said that it was David Hume's idea of implicit submission, and in his words, the easiness with which the many are governed by the few, that inspired her to write this new book. She continues, the story lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. But she's doing this in many ways. Most importantly, two ways. By yes, showing us that many characters we know and love in this series are victims of propaganda themselves, but also showing the reader that they are not immune to this propaganda. The Hunger Games is a series that I fear a lot of people have a tendency to take at face value. And this may be a result of us reading these books when we were literally tweens. A lot of us haven't picked them up since. So it's very easy for us to oversimplify a lot of the themes that Suzanne includes in these books. I just mean that I see a lot of this going on. Capitol bad, districts good. Game makers bad, victors good. And this could also just be a result of the Hunger Games being thrust into mainstream media and a lot of people only having seen the films, which in my opinion miss a lot of important pieces of context. But Suzanne is taking her time in this one. Yes, she did, to dismantle this and take a deeper look into how class and social divides are used by the few to distract the many from who the real enemy is. I think Sunrise on the Reaping, more than any of the other books, forces the reader and the characters in the book to overcome any gross overgeneralizations that they have made about the state of Panem and the history of revolution, and truly make us and them think, why did it happen when it happened? Who do we truly have to thank for it? And this is something that the characters struggle a lot with in this book. Why do the districts submit at all? At the beginning of the book, before we even get to chapter 1, there is a quote by David Hume on the front. It's the third quote in the front of the book. Nothing appears more surprising to those who consider human affairs with a philosophical eye than the easiness with which the many are governed by the few, and the implicit submission with which men resign their own sentiments and passions to those of their rulers. When we inquire by what means this wonder is effected, we shall find that, as force is always on the side of the governors have nothing to support them but opinion. It's therefore on opinion only that government is founded, and this maxim extends to the most despotic and most military governments, as well as to the most free and most popular. Is our misunderstanding of our neighbors, is the fact that they're just easier targets, a reason that we say that challenging the people who are the real problem is effectively impossible? Using some characters that we know well, and also some that we know loosely from the original trilogy, she seems to really be pushing the readers in this to 1, reject the concept of a moral binary, and 2, think a little deeper about why the revolution was successful with Katniss as the face of it and not someone else. These two things go hand in hand, and that's what I'm gonna try and dive a little deeper into in this video, okay? Sunrise on the Reaping starts on the morning of the reaping of the 50th Hunger Games. We also, just to make things a little bit more depressing, learn that it's Haymitch's birthday, so that's fun. We start in almost the exact same place with Haymitch that we do with Katniss on the morning of her reaping. In bed, it's the morning of the reaping, we have a beloved little sibling in our face that forces us to remember the actual stakes of the day. And regarding Haymitch, this is actually the first time that we ever learn who his family is. We know that Haymitch has a family that he lost, or rather was violently taken away from him, but we don't have any idea who these people actually are. So we're introduced to Sid, his 10-year-old little brother. Ignoring the chore of filling the cistern that his mother has tasked him with, which ultimately will end up being a one of his gravest mistakes in this book, he goes to meet his girlfriend, Lenore Dove, in the meadow. Directly mirroring Katniss's scene with Gale at the beginning of the first book, where they're sitting outside and talking about the reaping and talking about escaping. They're with their comfort people. They're with their people that help them survive this literal hellscape. When Haymitch gets to the meadow, he sees the love of his life sitting perched up on a little rock, surrounded by her little geese. When Haymitch joins her, she wishes him a happy birthday, they share a kiss or two, and they end up having such a simple debate. It's not really a debate, it's really just Lenore Dove introducing Haymitch to a new way of thinking. One that he doesn't quite understand, or he's never really given himself the space to try to understand it. Lenore Dove is just trying to get Haymitch to see a world where the sun does not rise on the reaping again. When they're talking about the reaping and how devastating this day is about to be for 4 families, Haymitch says, "I guess we're going to talk about it. It's going to be all right," I say, which rings hollow. You don't really believe that, do you? Maybe not, but I try to, because the reaping's going to happen no matter what I believe, sure as the sun will rise tomorrow. Lenore Dove frowns. Well, there's no proof that will happen. You can't count on things happening tomorrow just because they happened in the past. It's faulty logic. Is it, I say? Because it's kind of how people plan out their lives. And that's part of our problem. Thinking things are inevitable, not believing change is possible. I guess, but I can't really imagine the sun not rising tomorrow. A crease forms between her eyebrows as she puzzles out a response. Can you imagine it rising on a world without a reaping? Not on my birthday. I've never had one that came without a reaping. I try to distract her with a kiss, but she's determined to make me see. No, listen, she says earnestly. Think about it. You're saying, today is my birthday, and there's a reaping. Last year on my birthday, there was also a reaping. So every year, there will be a reaping on my birthday. But you have no way of knowing that. I mean, the reaping didn't even exist until 50 years ago. Give me one good reason why it should keep happening, just because it's your birthday. She's desperately trying to get him to understand that just because they've been living their life this way every single day, it does not mean that there cannot be a world without a reaping. It does not mean that there cannot be a world without the Hunger Games. You just have to dare to believe there could be. There's another David Hume quote on the front of the book that says that the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. Lenore Dove is the personification of hope, choosing to believe that every day that passes with the reaping looming over their heads is not only a result of the capital's military dominance, but also simply as a result of the people in Panem, in the district specifically, not believing that they have a say in anything at all. And President Snow knows this. We know he knows this because in the original trilogy, he's got all these damn quotes about hope. Oh, fear is nothing if there's hope. Oh, hope is very dangerous. We can't give him hope. It's like the answer's right there, right? And I'm not saying that as a way to oversimplify it and say that that's the only ingredient in the formula of revolution, but one of the true catalysts for a rebellion is having that paradigm shift, believing that the governed have a fighting chance. And Lenore Dove having this conversation with Haymitch is ultimately what inspires him to engage in the rebel plot that happens in this book. He's scared out of his mind. He's like, I don't know, y'all. I don't know if this is a good idea though, like, can we think about it just a little more though? Like, I also think that the way that Plutarch is used as a way to constantly remind Haymitch that he just simply doesn't have anything to lose is sometimes hilarious in the book, I'm not gonna lie. There was one scene when they're in the training room and there's a moment where Haymitch thinks like, wait, there are a lot of weapons in here and also the game makers are in here and like the trainers are in here and like low-key we could revolt right now. Thoughts on that? And he's talking to another tribute about that. Plutarch overhears and he's like, bro, why didn't you? Do y'all not realize that there are way more of y'all than there are of us? Why is that axe not in your hand and why are you not using it? But all jokes aside, hope and even courage to pursue really terrifying acts of rebellion are not the only things that sustain a revolution. A large part of the success of revolution, which Collins is trying to show us in this book, is the perfect blend of circumstance, luck, and perfect timing. And listen, y'all, she is not hiding this, okay? She's really drilling this point home. It's everywhere. It's plastered all over the book. Once Haymitch has won his games, and I say won because what does that even mean? That man lost everything. Plutarch Heavensbee, who I've introduced a little bit already, but is a character we're gonna get into a little bit more later because he's literally insane, has a conversation with Haymitch on the Victory Tour. I love this scene, and it's not even just because of what they're talking about, but it's the fact that this conversation happens in District 11. And Plutarch takes Haymitch into this attic that I believe is in the Justice Building in 11, and it is very clear that that attic is the same attic that Haymitch brings Katniss and Peeta into after Peeta promises a certain portion of his winnings to the families of the tributes in his games. So you get this little Easter egg that the only reason Haymitch even knew that attic existed is because 25 years prior, he had a conversation with Plutarch up there. And I just thought that was, I loved that. I thought that was so good. But anyway, let's get into this scene. How is it you're looking so well, Plutarch? Wyrus and Mags were tortured, right? And I'm guessing Beedy's dead? Beedy's too valuable to kill. Plutarch says, we can't any of us do it alone. We demonstrated a lot of nerve and intelligence in that arena. We need your help. Me? I say in disbelief. I'm living proof that the Capitol always wins. I tried to keep that sun from rising on another reaping day. I tried to change things, and now everybody's dead. You don't want me, and I don't want him. I don't want help from anybody in the Capitol ever again. I can never trust them. We do want you. You shook up the Capitol, both figuratively and literally, with that earthquake. You were capable of imagining a different future, and maybe it won't be realized today. Maybe not in our lifetime. Maybe it will take generations. We're all part of a continuum. Does that make it pointless? I just don't know, but I do know you need someone different from me. No, Haymitch, we need someone exactly like you. Just luckier, I say? Luckier or with better timing. Having an army at their back wouldn't hurt. Sure, that would have helped. Where are you going to get an army, Plutarch? If we can't find one, we'll have to build one. But obviously finding one's easier. And then we can kill one another, like back in the good old dark days? Well, you know better than anyone what we're up against with snow. If you think of another way to stop that sunrise, you let me know. First of all, not the just like casual alluding to District 13, Suzanne. I think this exposes one of my many frustrations with the way that fantasy and dystopian genre authors write protagonists. Because authors really spend a lot of time trying to convince the reader that the protagonist, who just like everyone else has experienced their entire lives under an oppressive regime, is somehow more special than the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who experience the same subjugation day in, day out. And in this book, a lot of people noticed just how many parallels there were between Katniss and Haymitch. How they both have a younger sibling that they want to protect. They both had their name in the Reaping Bowl more times because they took out Tesserae. How neither of them were actually reaped. Katniss volunteers for her sister, and Haymitch ends up in the games as basically a form of punishment for getting between a peacemaker and Lenore Dove when chaos ensues on the day of the reaping. The fact that they both have widowed mothers as a result of their fathers dying in mining accidents, and their fear, their hesitance to join the revolution. Because as strong as these two characters are, they are children at the end of the day. They're scared out of their goddamn minds. Katniss didn't put those berries to her lips because she was trying to bring down the Capitol. She did it because she didn't want to engage in this system of killing anymore. Even in Haymitch's case, he did use what he thought was his last dying breath to bring down the arena, to break the machine. But even then, it was a desperate last-ditch effort that I don't think that he thought would actually fully work. He just was like, I'm gonna be gone, so I might as well try something else. And showing us all these parallels between these two characters was not just fan service. It was to show us that these are basically just two of the same damn people. One of them was almost successful in inciting a revolution. The other one was successful in inciting a revolution. But when you look at the two of them next to each other, what really makes Katniss different from Haymitch, and what really makes Haymitch different from Katniss? I think it's really important for us as readers of these types of stories to remember that there is truly no perfect hero. There's no perfect person for the job. So the next time you read a dystopian novel and the author's trying to convince you that there's something just so special about the protagonist that no one else has, let's think about that just a little bit. Just a little bit. And I do think that at some points in the trilogy, there are scenes that paint Katniss as this once-in-a-lifetime revolutionary prodigy of sorts. But in this book, Suzanne is working overtime, sparing no moments to make sure that you understand as a reader that Haymitch and Katniss are like this. The only difference between his failed revolution and her successful one is just like Plutarch said, luck, timing, and an army. There's a quote from Victor Hugo that reads, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." And there's a much more popular variation of this quote that is, "A revolution whose time has come cannot be stopped." I absolutely love how Suzanne uses certain elements of her books to show us just how true this is. Especially in Catching Fire, where the design of the final arena to ever be built is a damn clock. She said, "Chop, chop, tick tock, the revolution's here. Pack up your bags. We ride at dawn. Everybody has a job here. Let's go." I just truly could not look at Catching Fire and that damn arena the same way again. But there's also been another thing that people on TikTok in particular have been talking about a lot in regards to this book, and it's the amount of lore drops in here. It is a lore drop gold mine. I've already told you about a really important character that makes a reappearance in this book to our surprise, and that is Plutarch Heavensbee. He's not quite a game maker yet in this book. He is just a videographer who's supposed to essentially just curate propaganda for the Capitol. So it's not that different than the role that he assumes in District 13, but still, he's very much similar to in Catching Fire, Snow's right-hand man. But in this book, we learn so much about character history, family lineage. It's actually stupid. Like, there's so much information in this about characters that we know and love. But I want to talk a little bit about why Suzanne Collins decided to bring these characters back. So in Ballad, we get these little Easter eggs to the previous books through the names of Academy students, like Snow's peers. It seems that his classmates are the ancestors of people that we meet in the original trilogy, like Arachne Crane being related to Seneca Crane, or this isn't a student, it's just another character, Lucky Flickerman, the host of the Hunger Games, being related to Caesar Flickerman, the host that we know in the original trilogy. And this is obviously to show us just how rampant nepotism is in the Capitol, but in Sunrise on the Reaping, it is a family reunion. Like Suzanne literally said, your cousins, hey, that's your daddy, you guys are friends, that's your auntie, and so on and so forth. It was truly mind-boggling. Haymitch's best friend, Burdock Everdeen, Katniss's father, and Katniss's mom, Astrid, is already dating Burdock. Mags and Wyrus are Haymitch's mentors. That one got me, bro. I was like jaw on the floor, my fists were clenched, I was like hitting myself over the head. Let's just pretend like I didn't forget the fact that we already know this next piece of information that I'm about to share, and let's like just ignore that for the rest of this video, because what I say is still relevant. It's just not relevant under the umbrella of lore drops. I don't know how I forgot that. It's like suddenly one night I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. while I was editing this video, and I was like, wait, I think we already knew this piece of information. Anyway, I digress. Please forgive me. But also Maysilee Donner, Haymitch's fellow tribute and later friend, Madge Undersea's auntie. Hello? Yeah, y'all remember Madge? Madge, Katniss's friend, the mayor's daughter, also the person who in the books gives Katniss the Mockingjay pin. We'll get into that a little later. Beetee? Yeah, hi. Beetee's actually in this too, yeah. He's the father of one of the District 3 tributes, Ampert, who we learn in this book was just put into the games to punish Beetee for a former rebel plot that failed. Ampert also ends up being Haymitch's partner in crime in executing the rebel plot in their games. Our homegirl Effie? Yeah, she's called in last minute by her sister, who's on Haymitch's styling team, to pick up the slack of their stylist, who is literally nowhere to be found. He's missing in action all the time and cannot do his job. To me, it's really important to note that these connections do not just serve the purpose of being fan service. It's to show us how delicate the fabric of revolution is. Every single one of these characters, yes, even Effie, is a crucial moving part to the success of the revolution later. It's been made very clear at the end of the book that Haymitch is not interested in joining the rebel cause, especially after all of his pain and suffering he's already gone through. We can only assume that his love for Katniss is what drew him to help her more than any of the other District 12 tributes that came before her. Like, his love for her and her father is what brought him to his senses. We are told in the epilogue, which don't get me started on the epilogue, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm about to talk about it for a second. We are told that Haymitch sees sees Katniss for the first time when she's just a wee little girl with her dad. Haymitch is basically just watching them like live their life and be kind of happy. His commitment to protect his friend's daughter, to give her a better life, it's so pivotal to this movement. Mags and Wyrus being Haymitch's mentors and telling Haymitch what to look for in the arena, what to look for in the training room that would give him hints about what the arena is going to look like. Wyrus talking to Haymitch about her games and reminding him that the arena is just a machine, it's a killing machine. Telling him first avoid the slaughter, get weapons, look for water, find food, and where to sleep fire and friends can keep. Which later on ends up being just like the exact same advice that he gives to Katniss and Peeta to survive in their games. And that ultimately ends up saving their lives. Them being kind to him, nurturing him, showing him that he has a place to let all of his emotions be free. Mags constantly reminding Haymitch that when he's in the arena, he needs to really remember what is important to him. Mags and Wyrus were to Haymitch what Haymitch was to Katniss and Peeta. Beetee, who was in the exact same position he was in with Katniss, and showing Haymitch exactly how he's going to execute this plan to bring down the arena. Even just Beetee, whose son has been put in the arena to punish him, loses his son and now has even more of a reason to have a fire under him to continue with this revolution. Like, everything is included to show you just how close, like how truly close Haymitch was to being Katniss, but also to show you how many embers there were to start another fire down the line. Mags and Wyrus and Beetee ending up in the Quarter Quell and ultimately being the people that Katniss wants to be in allyship with. And lastly, we cannot forget Maysilee Donner and that damn Mockingjay pin. It was first introduced to us when Maysilee asks Haymitch if she can see his token from home that was given to him by Lenore Dove, the Flint Striker. Maysilee's like, I collect jewelry. Can I have a look at that? And he's like, no. One, Lenore Dove doesn't like you. And two, I don't plan on ever taking this thing off. During this conversation, Haymitch is telling us how Maysilee has the Mockingjay pin to begin with. It was a gift from her father, but handcrafted by Tam Amber. And Tam Amber and Clerk Carmine are two of the only people alive from the Cubby, it seems to be. It infuriated Lenore Dove that Maysilee had the Mockingjay pin, so much so that she was talking about I'm gonna break into her house and take it back. Huh? A crime? Girl, she just felt like Maysilee did not appreciate the craftsmanship and she just did not appreciate the Mockingjay in general. Especially because Maysilee was complaining when she got the pin, talking about it's ugly, I want something else, melt it down and make me something cute. So Maysilee never wears the Mockingjay pin. Instead, she shoves it in the back of a drawer in her house, and her and Lenore Dove end up dying before either of them can ever see it again. But that's when Madge comes in. Because it's safe for us to assume that one day somebody, maybe Madge, found the Mockingjay pin and it just stayed in the family during that time. So the morning of the reaping in the first book, when Katniss and Gale are at Madge's house, Madge gives Katniss the pin as a token of her district. It's just so crazy to think that without Maysilee, Katniss would have never gotten that pin. And I also think that this family in particular having the pin, a family that is more wealthy than anyone else, shows us that this pin represents a lot more than just revolution. It represents allyship between different classes in Panem. That's why I think one of the biggest things that they fumbled in the movie was not having Madge in it at all, and instead just having Greasy Say, a woman in the Hob, give Katniss the pin. And the crazy thing is, up until this book, I used to really say that I didn't think Madge was important enough to include in the movies. It makes me sick to my stomach to think that that's something that I actually said. Think before you speak, girl. What's really fascinating to me about that scene with Gale, Katniss, and Madge is the fact that Gale makes it abundantly clear how much he resents Madge, specifically because of how wealthy she is. And the crazy part is, Gale knows that his anger is misplaced. He even goes as far to say that the Tezzeret, the system that's used to include their name in the Reaping Bowl more times than it absolutely is required in order to get more food, is a way for the capital to divide people in the district with more and less money. And yet he still resents Madge. The way that Collins plays with class in the original Hunger Games trilogy is really fascinating to me, and we just dive deeper and deeper and deeper into this in the prequel novels. Like I said earlier, it's very easy to grossly oversimplify class structures and dynamics in Panem. Districts 1 through 4 are rich. They have an unfair advantage in the games, and this amplifies other districts' hate of them because of how often they win the games. It's also really easy to say, okay, well, capital citizens, they have a lot more money than us, and they are living in the capital, therefore they have it better off than us. They don't do anything to stop the games, and they're seemingly very comfortable in their lives. But throughout the series, Suzanne is working overtime to get you, the reader, and her characters to really understand who their anger needs to be pointed at. And this district to district hate, this district to capital hate, is represented on a really micro scale within the districts when we're looking at Maysilee Donner and Haymitch and Lenore Dove's relationship. Intra-district relations, if you will. Maysilee Donner is merchant class, and she's very hated by Lenore Dove in particular. We're told that part of this is because Maysilee has a secret of Lenore Dove's that she doesn't want to get out, which is later exposed to be the fact that Lenore Dove is vandalizing certain parts of 12 and just leaving political messaging in her wake. But it's also kind of just implied that Lenore Dove does not mess with Maysilee because of her status. And this is shown especially in the way that Lenore Dove talks about Maysilee and the Mockingjay pin. We're also led to believe that Maysilee is just some kind of mean bully. Now, Maysilee is not perfect. She definitely is angry. That's an understatement. But we actually don't have any proof that Maysilee has done anything explicitly mean to Lenore Dove. It's just kind of said through Haymitch's point of view that Maysilee thinks she's better than everyone else, and that Marilee, her twin sister, is the nicer of the two, and everyone's kind of just scared of Maysilee. But if you look at Maysilee's character closely, you really realize that there is fundamentally nothing very different between Maysilee and Lenore Dove and Haymitch and anyone else in 12. She's a character who at her core has the same beliefs as Peeta and Haymitch. They don't want their tears used for the capital's entertainment. They don't want to be pawns in their games. They want to keep their dignity in any way they possibly can. When Lenore Dove and Haymitch are separated right before Haymitch gets on the train to go to the capital, they don't let Plutarch use their goodbye as entertainment. And then throughout the book, we see a lot of different ways that Maysilee tries to keep her own dignity, but also help other tributes keep their dignity as well. Even at one point telling Luella, the youngest of the District 12 tributes, if you let them treat you like an animal, they're going to treat you like an animal. There's even a point in the games where Haymitch starts to doubt how loyal Maysilee truly is. He says, "A despicable thought crosses my mind, that Maysilee has somehow joined up with the careers. Then I remember how combative she was with Silka from the first encounter and feel ashamed of myself. I examined the necklace she wove to securely carry Wyatt's script coin. She spent most of her training hours helping the newcomers display their tokens with pride, when she could have been learning skills to protect herself. Whatever else she may be, Maysilee Donner is not a turncoat." And I think the usage of the word turncoat here is just so, chef's kiss. And there's another point in the games where they've reunited and Haymitch says, "What do you say to the meanest girl in town who's become your friend?" No, more than a friend really, a newcomer, being tributes and not killing each other, looking out for each other with no questions asked. That's family, I guess. Throughout the games, through Haymitch seeing that Maysilee is in the exact same position that he's in, she got put into the games the same way that he did, and all she wants is to die in a way that does not give the capital what they want. He's like, yeah, homegirl's my friend. We're actually allies. Unfortunately, Maysilee does end up dying, which is so sad, and I really hated to see her go. Not even Maysilee's father could buy her way out of the games, and he tried to. So I think that Lenore Dove / Haymitch's relationship with Maysilee Donner really just puts a mirror up to Gale and Katniss and Madge, and how the merchant class and the people in 12 who are directly in their line of sight are a lot easier to blame than the people in power. Especially with Gale, I was like, Sir, your name is in that same damn bull. You going to the same Hunger Games if your name is called. This hostility is uncalled for. Now, I think it's a lot easier for people to wrap their head around the fact that the districts are not each other's enemy. Or now, in the context of Maysilee and Madge and Katniss and Gale and Haymitch and Lenore Dove, realizing that the merchant class is not your enemy just because you're from the seam. You're all from District 12 at the end of the day, and you all get reaped in the same Hunger Games. Capital citizens in particular. One day, before Haymitch's games start, Plutarch pulls him into a room and gives him an opportunity to talk to Lenore Dove on the phone. Before he gives Haymitch the phone, he says this: "Listen, Haymitch, I know you don't like me, and you certainly don't trust me, but you should know that, despite appearance, a desire for freedom is not limited to the districts, and your misfortune does not give you the right to assume so. I hope after tonight you'll consider this. First of all, a little harsh, my guy. This kid is about to go and die in the Hunger Games. Now here you go talking about your problems, you feeling some type of way, you're in your feelings. But this to me is one of the most important moments in the book. At this point, we have no reason or real proof to believe that Plutarch has any personal ties to the rebellion. We have no information on his motives as a rebel leader. All we know is he's running this show, and clearly wants Haymitch to understand, like, damn man, you are a victim of propaganda as well, if you truly believe that it's only people in the districts who desire freedom from the government. There's one scene in particular that I love that Suzanne uses to show just how disposable everyone is other than Snow and his very few loved ones. It's this one scene during the games where some of the game makers have been brought into the arena to like mop up a little mess and work on some technical difficulties. It's like crazy. You know those berms that were used as a place where they like release mutts out of? There are some game makers chilling and doing some maintenance and some janitorial duties around the berm. The game maker with the mop, who looks like he's near our age, lets out an indignant, "Hey, watch it." Sir, I know from experience that mopping's a bottom of the ladder job, so finding a game maker at it seems bizarre. Like watching Plutarch Heavensbee peel potatoes or President Snow clean the hair out of a drain. Mariette, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, who apparently sensed some weirdness, comes to a halt at the edge of the clearing. "What's going on? Are you game makers?" she exclaims. The game maker with the drill raises her mask and straightens up to her full height. "That's right, and all four of you are in absolute violation of the rules. You must immediately withdraw or there will be repercussions." "Girl, that'd be a lot more impressive if you weren't shaking like a leaf," observes Maysilee, fingering her blowgun. "You must be pretty expendable, you three, getting sent in here to tidy up for us." There's a pause while everybody considers the truth of this. Then all three game makers make a break for the ladder that leads down to Sub A. And then she just absolutely goes crazy on them and kills them all. This was such a here, damn way for Suzanne Collins to be like, "Really, y'all? You think Capitol citizens are safe? You even think the game makers are safe after I showed y'all what he did to Seneca Crane. I showed y'all what he did to Seneca Crane." And also, let's consider the fact that in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, she introduces us to young Snow, who, by the way, is emaciated. He's poor and starving, but was born to one of the most influential families in the capital. As much as I don't want to make an excuse for that man, and absolutely nothing that he did is excusable, Snow's history is very much used as a way to fight against the propaganda that the reader has fallen victim to regarding the capital and its citizens, and how much their privileges or their perceived privileges actually matter. How much social capital do you have, and does it mean anything at the end of the day? I think it would be a really boring way to engage with this series to be like, all capital citizens are bad. They have somehow been convinced that the government will not come after them. But we know that that is just strictly not true. And Plutarch's character alone is just such a study on ideological purity. He's this seemingly extremely privileged person from a very big family in the capital who ultimately uses his powers for good, but is willing to let as many children die in the process of achieving that win as is necessary. He doesn't seem to have a line when it comes to what he is and isn't willing to do for the sake of a successful rebellion. Everything he does, even the kind things he does for Haymitch, are only used as a way to get Haymitch to trust him so that he'll serve his purpose. Like, this man is truly diabolical, but it's also so hard to form a clear opinion on him because his perseverance and his commitment to the rebellion was necessary, and his positioning in all of this was very necessary. Like, after the rebel plot gone wrong during Haymitch's games, Mags, Wyrus, Beatty, they've all been punished by the Capitol. Like, Mags is in a wheelchair. We like get a little glimpse of what they've done to Wyrus by showing that she's just like a little bit out of it in the same way that she is in Catching Fire. Everyone has answered to their crimes in the eyes of the Capitol except for Plutarch. He also is engaging in this really sinister game where he gets to decide who is disposable and who is not. This is his final conversation with Haymitch in this book. All right there, Haymitch? I have nothing to live for. I say this without even a note of self-pity. I am simply stating a fact. Then you have nothing to lose. That puts you in a position of power. I would like to kill him at that moment, but what would be the point? Instead I say, you think you're a good person, don't you, Plutarch? You think you're a good guy because you told me about the sun and the berms, when what you really did is help create the Capitol's propaganda and broadcast it to the country. 49 kids died for it, but you gave it the old Heavensbee spin, and in that propo, you're some kind of hero. Plutarch takes a moment to answer. I'm nobody's idea of a hero, Hamish, but at least I'm still in the game. But at the end of the day, Plutarch clearly still has the trust of people like Beatty, Mags, and Wyrus, whether that be that they actually trust him and like him, or it's simply out of desperation. But it's enough for them to pursue this book's rebel plot with him and another one in the future. This is not something we should take lightly, but at the same time, Plutarch has committed some crimes against humanity, all in the name of disguising his true reasons for functioning as Snow's right-hand man. Like, the jury is still out on him, but I do think that he, along with Snow, along with any other Capitol citizens like Tigris and Effie, show the varying degrees of Capitol sentiment, and that not everyone in that city's walls is treated remotely equally. Sorry, we had to switch up locations for a second because something happened with my camera. Anyway, that's besides the point. Having finished this book, I can say that for me at least, this was one of the most impactful Hunger Games novels to date. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the stuff that I've talked about for the past however long recontextualizes almost everything that we knew from the original trilogy. And that is very, very hard to do. We realize that there were very specific things that Suzanne wanted to show us and not show us, and she took this book as an opportunity to be like, hey y'all, I am opening up that door. We're going there. And I think Ballad did that as well, just in a very different way. And the criticism that I see about Ballad in particular is that it created excuses for Snow's behavior, that it kind of softened the blow. It made some of the things that he did excusable. And I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think that us learning exactly how Snow went from just like a regular Capitol citizen to the dictator that we know today makes the whole thing a lot more sinister. I think that just because we get inside the head of a villain and we get to see how he excused his behavior does not make it any more right. And I also think that when we're talking about villains in stories like this, it's not interesting to just have somebody be evil from the day that they were born. Like, we need to play around a little bit with this idea that they could have potentially not been that bad before and learn about exactly what it was that made them become that sick and twisted. The context that we're given in this adds so many more layers to the characters we know and the world that we know. And in my opinion, this does that even more flawlessly. Anyway, I could talk about this series and this book in particular for literally the rest of my life nonstop if you let me, but I'm gonna stop this video here. Let me know what some of your favorite parts of Sunrise on the Reaping were, things that got you itching your head a little bit, some things that maybe weren't as clear to you. If you agree with me on anything, if you disagree with me on anything, I'm down to have that conversation. But I literally cannot wait for this book to be on the big screen. I can't wait to see what they decide is worth keeping in the movie and what's not worth keeping, because, you know, sometimes that will anger the girls. But overall, I'm just so grateful that she decided to write this story and give us a little bit more insight into revolution in Panem. Thank you for watching. I'm tired and I'm sweaty, so I'm gonna go now. Bye.